thanks to everyone for agreeing to come out. Again, I want to clarify, we are the host location for this, and I have just agreed to be one of the speakers. But the ladies here coordinated everything, and we owe them a round of applause for all the hard work. A couple introductory comments. I do not consider myself an expert on the details of Common Core. In fact, I'm late coming to the party, if you will. I was reluctant to get involved at first because I also recognize there are a lot of good people who have different opinions on what good education should be. And I'm not presumptuous enough to assume that everybody in this room agrees or disagrees on whether or not Common Core is good or bad. But I am enough of an educator and enough of a believer in the liberal arts of education, in the liberty and the liberation that the liberal arts represents, that this is what a good education is about. It's coming together and talking about ideas and having the freedom to agree and disagree and then decide who's right and who's wrong, what's true and what's false. That's good education, and that's why I finally entered into the Common Core debate. I felt that Jenny was being ignored, to be quite frank. She had come to my office, well over a year ago, and I kind of ignored her because I didn't have the time. But the more I heard of the concerns of Common Core, the more sense those concerns made to me, and I felt whether Jenny was right or whether she was wrong, and whether her partners in opposition to Common Core were right or wrong, they deserve to be heard. Because if it's true, it's true. If it's not, it's not. Let them state their case. And anybody who wants to shut that down doesn't believe in good education, in my view. Now, that's the spirit with which I approach you tonight. So I'm going to ask you to think about the power of ideas. Again, I'm not going to get into the weeds about Common Core. I'm going to ask you to consider a couple different ideas and what you think of the difference in those ideas. Then I'm going to share 4 stories with you very quickly, and then I'm going to read a portion of a speech that I gave with Jenny down at the Capitol. By the way, I've participated in 2 debates with her. Now, she was on the same side with me as we debated others. And I've never seen anybody beat her. They may disagree, but they haven't refuted her points effectively. So if she's wrong, they have not successfully proved that in my mind. I consider her very well informed on the details. Again, I'm not going to get into those. Richard Weaver, in his 1947 work, Ideas Matter, said this: ideas matter. Ideas have consequences. Ideas lead somewhere. There's no such thing as a neutral idea. Some ideas are good and they lead to good places, and some ideas are bad and they lead to bad places. It's a very simplistic concept, isn't it? But we are human beings, and part of what makes us human and a being, as opposed to an animal, is our ideas. We think, we argue, we debate. When you were driving up here this afternoon, did you see the cows arguing out in the field? They don't do that because they're not human beings. They were not created in the image of God, and therefore they don't have that rational capacity that you and I share. That's why we can get engaged in a good disagreement, because we're human. Ideas matter. Some ideas are good and some ideas are bad. Now think of the difference between these ideas. Education for information versus education for literature and literacy. Education for a career or education for character. Education to pass a test or education to embrace the truth. Education that allows you to achieve what's common, or education that frees you up to pursue the exceptional. Education that pursues research and education that pursues what's right. You see, a lot of the differences in these terms would be what C.S. Lewis said: brass is more easily mistaken for gold than is clay. It's not that the lesser idea is the dirt or the clay or the garbage. It's just we shouldn't be too easily satisfied with brass, the shiny stuff that isn't yet gold. Information isn't bad, but it's not literature. A career isn't bad, we all need one, but don't you think you should have an education that gives you character so that you can perform that career honestly and justly and fairly and relate to other people as an honest human being? Commonality I consider to be an inferior, brassy, if you will, concept. Exceptionality is gold. Really what we're debating today, in my view, is the difference between the Germanic model and the British model. The United States model of higher education, of education in general, was founded on the British model. And the British model was an education for a free man, a free people. It was a liberal education. The classical liberal believed in liberty and liberation. You're all liberals if you didn't know that. Okay, we'll get into that in a minute. I'm going to tell you 4 stories. 4 stories quickly, and then I'm going to read about a 4-minute statement to you. 2 debates, 1 governor, and 1 university catalog. Debate number 1. Jenny and I were debating down in Tulsa, I believe it was this summer, and we debated Brian Hunt and Chris Bench. 2 good men, they're good men. They may even vote the same way I vote. I suspect they may. Neither one of them are professional educators, I might add. And not to be pedantic or arrogant, but I am. And so is Jenny. And if we're going to talk about education, I'd like to at least receive some due respect that I might just know a little bit about what I'm talking about. Now, Brian Hunt at one time became very, very exasperated with something that I said because I kept emphasizing, and Jenny probably did too, I don't want to steal her thunder, but I kept emphasizing that education, the best education, is local education. And that the best education of local education is education from the parents to the kid. Yep. That parents have the ultimate responsibility, and then the local community does, and then the local community assigns that or delegates that responsibility to its teachers and its school board. And that's good education. And the higher up the ladder you go, the worse the education becomes. Give the local communities, the parents and the families, and the local teachers the freedom to educate their kids. That seemed to make sense to me. The first story is the response from Mr. Hunt, who has served on the school board in Tulsa, I believe, if I remember correctly. And no, I'm not kidding, he said this. Dr. Piper, you've emphasized local education. Like he wanted to say ad nauseum, because I wouldn't let it go. You've emphasized local education as being the best education. And this is a quote. Do you really believe, Dr. Piper, that that type of local control could be assumed responsibly by communities like Hugo and Sallisaw? And there was a gasp in the room. I'm being serious, this is not facetious. I felt sorry for the man because everybody just had a gasp of disgust. Because what he just said is those poor, stupid souls in Hugo and Sallisaw aren't smart enough to educate their own children. And those dumb teachers in Hugo and Sallisaw aren't well educated enough to decide what's good and what's bad and what's right and what's wrong. They need to be told by somebody that's smarter than them. Because Hugo and Sallisaw can't do it on their own. I find that disturbing. And so should you. My response, by the way, was, well, Mr. Hunt, the last I know is those poor, stupid, homeschooled families in Hugo and Sallisaw are doing a lot better job at educating their kids than the poor souls that are subjected to your crappy education. Second story. Jenny and I had been invited to debate on OETA TV on a Sunday afternoon. A couple individuals, one of which was the school superintendent for Stillwater Public Schools. I kept harping on liberal education and academic freedom and intellectual liberty and local responsibility for the ideas that are important for my family, my kids, and my community. The superintendent, in exasperation, at the end of the program, and her last word was this: it doesn't matter what Piper says, because we've already decided and the legislature has voted we're not going to talk about it anymore. Now, she could not have made my point or yours any better, because what she just said is her ideas are worthy of discussion and worthy of being taught, but mine aren't, because we're not going to talk about ideas any longer. Now, what kind of academic freedom and intellectual liberty is that? Somebody above me and somebody above you is going to decide to shut down the debate, and I don't consider that to be liberal education. It's foreclosed. It's ideological fascism. I'm going to use your word there. Now be careful how you use that. I'm not contending that there's a political agenda there. But do you know what a fascist is? Do you know where the word fascism comes from? It comes from a binding of sticks together into a controlled and strong bond. Dozens and dozens of twigs bound together in a handle for a hatchet is a fascist. And it's intellectual fascism to decide that we're going to bind together a certain group of ideas and none other are welcome. I don't accept that. That's not good education. Right. 2 more stories and then my 4-minute summary. 2 weeks ago, the governor of New York indicated that all those who disagree with him, who are conservatives, radicals in his view, those that believe in pro-life, those that believe in traditional marriage, those that believe in the First and Second Amendment, those that are constitutionalists, those radical conservatives can leave the state. They're not welcome there. Well, that's very tolerant of him, isn't it? Does it smack as if he just advertised that he can't tolerate your intolerance? And that he hates those hateful people. He knows that nothing can be known. He's absolutely sure that nothing is sure. It's the dog chasing its tail of the progressive era. It's the arrogance of the human mind coming alive before your eyes where somebody says, leave if you're not going to agree with me. That's not classical liberalism, folks. Finally, one last story. And I'm going to try to tie them together so that you can understand why I'm telling you these things. In 2001 course catalog, the University of Michigan has a course entitled The Ethics of Corporate Management. I'm glad that they're teaching it. I'm from Michigan. I'm glad they care. Their course description, however, says this. This course does not deal with the personal, moral issues of truthfulness and honesty. I'll say it again in case you didn't get that. A course on the ethics of corporate management says, this course does not deal with the personal, moral issues of truthfulness and honesty. You see, the reason I care about Common Core is I want to decide how to teach my kids what's right and what's wrong. I would like to, as a community, have the liberty and the freedom to select teachers that are going to do a good job of teaching character as well as a career. I would like these teachers to have the liberty and the intellectual freedom and the academic integrity to delve into the classics and literature rather than just passing on information. And I would like them to pursue the exceptional rather than the common. I would like to have the liberty within the state of Oklahoma that anybody can come here, whether you're Mormon, Mennonite, Muslim, or Methodist, and express your ideas because the First Amendment protects you and allows you to do that. I may not agree with you theologically, but you should have the freedom to express yourself. As Thomas Jefferson said, if it doesn't break my leg or pick my pocket, what do I care? Amen. That's liberty. That's constitutional liberty. Brian Hunt doesn't want to give you the local authority if you're from Hugo and Samosa. The school superintendent of Stillwater says we've already discussed these ideas and we're not going to do so anymore. Andrew Cuomo says leave his state if you disagree with him, and the University of Michigan doesn't even care to discuss ethics within those personal moral issues of truthfulness and honesty. Ideas have consequences, and these are bad ideas. And I don't want some elite individual in San Francisco or New York City or Washington, D.C. or Wichita or Oklahoma City telling me what to think or how to teach my kids. I'm going to read this to you and then I'll be quiet. Good education, classical liberal education, is one that in its purest form, paradoxically, is a balance of confidence and humility. Our confidence must be in the truth, which is the only reliable foundation for liberty. Only truth breaks the bonds of oppression. Only truth silences the arrogant. Only truth overpowers the despot. Only truth gives us the freedom to bring all ideas to the public square with the confidence that in the end we will keep those ideas that are good and get rid of those ideas that are bad. Our humility, however, must be in ourselves. We must remember that our Creator laughs at our wisdom, and our wisdom is no better than His foolishness. A truly educated person understands such a balance of confidence and humility. Confidence concerning God's ways, and humility concerning our own. Remember what Os Guinness has told us. All truth is true, even if no one believes it, and all falsehood is false, even if everyone believes it. Truth is true, and that's just the end of it. Human consent has nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with what is true. We will only find truth when we place our confidence in it and not in what pedantic pedagogues declare to be common. This is why I'm against Common Core. I'm against it because I believe in academic freedom. Freedom to pursue the uncommon, the exceptional, the unpopular, and freedom to not be constrained by the consensus or the crowd. I'm against Common Core because I believe in intellectual integrity, the integration of head and heart and fact and faith that is directed by the student's thirst for truth and not the state's hunger for control. I'm against Common Core because I believe in the liberal arts, in liberty and liberation, a free mind and a free man rather than one held in bondage by politics and power and what is popular or common. I'm against Common Core because I believe in the humility of the student rather than the arrogance of the state. I'm against Common Core because I refuse to celebrate the mindless march of lemmings craning over a cliff of commonality. I'm against Common Core because I'm tired. I'm so very tired of the politically correct and boringly predictable ad hominem attacks on the questioning voice such as mine. And I'm tired of the obvious ad populum fallacy implicit in the word common. I'm against Common Core because of the intellectual mediocrity that has already resulted in many of its proponents not understanding a thing I just said. Or the basic Socratic logic I just used. I'm against Common Core because as an educator, I recognize that when we exchange the truth of God for a lie, we build a house of cards that will fall to mankind's inevitable temper tantrum of seeking control and power. History tells us time and time again that to deny what is right and true and to embrace what is wrong and false is to fall prey to the rule of the gang or the tyranny of one. Does subscribing to Common Core, to a common core of ideas constructed by some faceless group, often some closed-door room, in some unknown location, make you feel more or less free? Do we really have more intellectual liberty at the end of the day? Or are we becoming more and more enslaved by the constructs of what the Germans call the Übermensch, Supermen, the power brokers, the elites, the fittest, if you will, who have survived in the political arenas of campaigns or college campuses? Are we free to live and think and believe within the boundaries and beauties of the classical liberal arts? Or are we becoming more and more bound by groupthink and political correctness and the commonality of what's popular? I'm against Common Core because, as a classical liberal and a confident conservative, I am driven by a hunger for answers rather than the protection of opinions. And I want an education that is not subject to the ebb and flow of personal agendas or political fads. I'm against Common Core because I believe in freedom. Freedom of thought and freedom of expression and freedom to dissent. I'm against Common Core because I'm energized by the unapologetic pursuit of truth. And wherever it leads, I'm confident in the words, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." Thank you.